Compendium Podcast hosted by Leadership Books. In just a moment, our host, Joseph Baker, will be joining us, along with a very special guest. Before we get started, I would like to introduce you to Joseph. He's a podcaster, event producer, writer, speaker, and audience builder. His passion is to help authors, speakers, and entrepreneurs build their audiences to monetize their leadership. Won't you please welcome our host, Joseph Baker.
Well, thanks so much for that intro. Welcome, everyone, to the Compendium Podcast. I'm very excited today to have Sarah Bowling with me. Sarah is on a mission to connect everyone with the heart of God while loving those who are overlooked, excluded, and ignored. Her unshakable conviction that unconditional love transforms everything, permeates every message, and connects individuals to the heart of God. Sarah aspires to facilitate this connection by equipping people with resources and tools that empower them to walk in an intimate and vibrant relationship with God. Sarah is a powerful scholar and a spirit-led teacher with a gift to articulate and connect God's life-giving revelation to our modern moment. Her passion takes her many places around the world to bring lasting change to each of us with the transforming love of God. Sarah also co-hosts a daily television program, Today with Marilyn and Sarah. To learn more about Sarah, you can find her at sarahbowling.org. That's bowling like the sport, Sarah Bowling. Sarah, thank you so much for joining us today on the Compendium Podcast.
Thanks, Joseph. Nice to hang out with you. I appreciate the opportunity.
Very much looking forward to interviewing you today and just adding value to our audience, both the audience that is watching and also listening today. So Sarah, you're doing a lot these days, but I just want to ask you up front, what is something that we would not find in your bio? There's a lot there that we do know, but what's something interesting about yourself that we might not know?
Yeah, a simple thing. One, I'm a coffee snob, like a major coffee snob. And so I'm very selective. And when I travel, I'm actually bring my own coffee with me because, I don't want to kind of take that risk. Because
Sure.
you kind of don't get consistently good coffee. So that's kind of a cheesy thing, and I also play pickleball.
Oh, nice.
Which is another like quirky little deal.
Very nice. Well, let's jump into talking a little bit about your book. Your book is titled, Hey God, Can We Talk? And I'll just read a quick description here. This is a practical book designed to transform your conversations with God from distant and religious into meaningful and authentic dialogues. Deeply rooted in Scripture, this book gives hands-on tools for interacting with God through the everyday stuff of life. Regardless of your background, experiences, or training, the tools in this book will empower you to have deeper and more intimate conversations with God. Sounds very interesting. I did have the opportunity to read the first chapter of the book, and you start out with a fairly provocative statement, especially coming from somebody who professes to be a Christian, a follower of Christ. And that opening statement is, I don't believe that Jesus is the Son of God. Obviously, especially for Christians, that's going to get your attention right out the gate. So tell me a little bit about that and what inspired you to sort of start your book in that way.
Yeah, I think that was when I was kind of wrestling with my faith in my early 20s. I was born and raised as pastor's kid, and so grew up in all of this stuff. In my early 20s, I was like, I think I want to figure out faith for myself and not just because of it as an offspring, And so I was wrestling, and that was conversation I had with my mom, like, hey, I don't believe in this stuff. And she was like, wow, that's really interesting. She wanted to swallow her tongue, like spit out her food. But she's like, we love you no matter what. We loved you when you were a baby and you didn't believe anything, and that's not going to change. So that was kind of a relief to me. But I started that way, the book that way, because it was a wrestle for me. And I walked away from my faith for a season, not to be rebellious, but to explore. And so, I remember when I came back to my faith, I had this really, I don't want to say sorrow, but I just was very tender with God. And I was like, I screwed up. I've known you from the very beginning. And when I came back to God, kind of to recommit my life to Christ, if you will, I remember I had this sense in my heart, like, oh my gosh, I just completely messed up. And that's what the first chapter in the book is about. What happens when you royally mess up? Because there's not a person listening or watching us today that hasn't completely screwed up with God. So how do you do a conversation with God when, not if, when you really, really screw up? And that's what that first chapter is about.
That's good. That's good. And who would you describe as your primary audience for this book? Who's going to be interested in reading this book?
I think people who are spiritually curious would find this book extremely beneficial. And you can be spiritually curious with any kind of background or no background, whether you're a Buddhist or, if you're a Muslim or if you're a Christian or you're agnostic or you're unsure. I think it's for anybody who's spiritually curious in terms of having a conversation with God. What can that look like? And also recognizing various experiences and seasons in our life where those can be springboards for better, more deep connecting conversations with God.
That's great. That's great. Tell me a little bit about the television show that you're involved with. I'm very curious. What is that all about? Where can people find it? Tell us more about that.
Yep. So my mom and I do every week they do a daily TV program called Today with Marilyn and Sarah. It's Christian television, so we're on a couple different networks. Of course, we're on, YouTube, all the standard, web platforms, all that. So we've been doing it. My mom's been doing TV, I think for more than 50 years, close to that. And I've been doing it for 25 years. So we do interviews and teach the Bible and just pretty much try to help people connect with God in their daily living.
Tell us a little bit more about the book. What would we find in there that's really an aha moment? Like what was, or how about for you, what was an aha moment when you were writing the book? Something that even surprised you?
Yeah. So at the end of every chapter, there's something called a conversation starter. And those conversation starters are very, very unique. And those were, for me, writing those were aha. A lot of them were very much aha moments. And I even wrote, like some of them were just experiments that I did, as well as some of my friends and community around me. I was like, hey, let's try this experiment. So we did kind of a game with time, if you will. And so there's a lot of those conversation starters that I think people, when they read them, some may be a little familiar, but I venture to say that a lion's share of them are very new and fresh and in a positive way, kind of provocative, like, ooh, let's try that. I mean, that looks really fun. That could be totally cool. So that's very much aha as I wrote it, but also experienced. And I still integrate some of those starters, conversation starters, even now. Like this morning, I did. I love doing those conversation starters.
That's great. That's great. So is there anything that's not in the book? Maybe a story or some thoughts that you thought about including, decided not to include? Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, I was thinking about that question because I was like, what would I have wanted to? And the only thing I came up with potentially was, maybe a few stories about my kids. However, I did not include those because my kids are young adults, and I want to protect the innocent, and number two, I want to preserve my relationship with them. So I was like, no, I think it's the better part of discretion to kind of leave some of those out. So no, I was really happy with the overall content, and I don't have any like, oops, I didn't, I don't have any of those regrets. So this is my favorite book that I've written.
That's great. That's great. So just for our listeners and our viewers today, just give us some tips for someone who is maybe struggling with having conversations with God, knowing where to start. Maybe, someone might feel embarrassed, or maybe somebody has never really spoken to God. That's even a foreign concept. What are some tips that you have for us today?
I think conversations with God sometimes can be intimidating, or like, depending on where you're at in your life, you might feel like I'm not worthy, or how do I talk to someone who's invisible and audible, like all power, there's a whole lot of ideas that kind of run through our mind. And I get it. I mean, and maybe based on our background or where we're currently at, our experience, or emotional stuff inside of us. And I guess the one tip I would give is just start. Just start. If you feel inadequate, okay, So it's okay. Go ahead and start. If you feel unworthy, okay, go ahead and start. You might think, well, I don't even know if anybody's listening, or is there really even a, just start. Hey, God, if you're there, kind of want to throw a couple things out there to you. Just start. I mean, I think sometimes, well, should I be formal? Should I be? I think the best way to start is just to be yourself, um, fully, as much as you can, and even say, I feel awkward, I feel uncomfortable. I'm not even sure if you're listening. I think just being honest and just starting. Don't make it too complicated or too stressful, or am I doing it right? I think a lot of people think that too, and I'm like, I don't think there's wrong. A conversation's a conversation. I mean, like, hey, let's just have a conversation, chit chat. And I think it can be about a whole lot of things, from little simple, seemingly easy stuff. Oop, I spilled something on my shirt, to, oh my God, I lost my job, or, it's a huge thing. So I think anywhere in the spectrum is a great starting point, and just be open for kind of some of the dialogue back and forth. So it's not just a monologue. And that's why I also talk about, I'm like, it's the dialogue. So there, and watching and listening for ways that God responds to us, or initiates, I think is also part of the learning curve. And I think this book helps with some of those, raising your awareness. Oh, that was God. Oh my goodness. Sometimes we get it in the rear view mirror more than the real time. And that's some of my prayer for this book, is that each reader is a little bit more aware in real time of those conversation opportunities, and invitations.
That's great. That's great. Tell us a little bit about the feedback that you've received. People who have actually read the book, what are people saying, and how has it helped them?
Yeah, I was looking at Amazon to kind of look at the feedback, because that's a pretty objective. Nobody's got any skin in the game. They can say whatever they want to say, right? They can be like, it's great, it's awful, it's medium. And the feedback just from those reviews have just been tremendously positive. I mean, tremendously positive. People that are like, hey, I've been doing this Jesus thing for a long time, and this has helped me. This has really opened my eyes to some new things. And a lot of people just saying, hey, this was simple, but so effective, so profound too. So I've just had really, really good feedback, and just a lot of people saying this has been massively helpful. So it's kind of exciting to hear that, people are really connecting, engaging with God.
That's awesome. So what's next for you? Do you have another book in the making? Are you sort of riding the wave of this book and enjoying that? What's going on in this season for you when it comes to writing?
Yeah, I'm working on fiction. I'm working on an allegory, modern day allegory for conversations with Jesus.
Mm.
And so, you look at the Bible, and there were conversations throughout the Gospels. Jesus had conversations with all kinds of people. And I believe those can continue to this day. So I'm writing that as an allegory, and it's fiction. So it's a little bit out of my wheelhouse, but I'm both challenged and excited by it. And I think that's that good little crosshairs where you're like, woo, this feels intimidating, but I'm kind of excited too. So that's kind of what I'm working on now.
That's awesome. So outside of the television show and working with your mom and all of that, are you a speaker? Do you speak on
Yep.
occasion or consistently?
Yep. I have invitations to churches pretty consistently, a couple conferences, and so travel a fair amount across the US and some international as well. So yeah, really cool opportunities. I like connecting with people and just kind of real basic face-to-face. I really like that, actually. And I think it's a lot of fun.
That's great. If you could leave our listeners and our viewers with one final thought today, especially when it comes to your book, what would you really want people to know?
I would want people to know that God absolutely wants to have conversations with us. The door is always open. There's always a welcome. There's a standing invitation to have a personal conversation with God, no matter what's happened, no matter what you've done or haven't done, no matter how horrific what's happening. God has a standing invitation to have conversations with us. And I think as well, I'd like to leave the audience with this: God enjoys your company. God actually really, really likes you. God is love. And so you can't really change who God is, because regardless of your behaviors, God loves you and is eager to have conversations, connection, intimacy, dialogue with each and every one of us. So that's what I would leave our audience, our listeners with today.
Excellent. For those of us that are able to visit sarahbowling.org, what will we find there? What type of information and resources will we find?
Yep, I have YouTube channel up there. I write a weekly blog. There's some sermons that have been posted. In my YouTubes, I always give a joke. So if somebody wants some grown moments, because they're like, oh, those are always fun. So there's social media and all that kind of stuff as well. So be that Instagram. I haven't tried TikTok yet. That's a little bit like, oh my gosh. But that could be fun too. But those are some of the things that are up on the website.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us today on the Compendium Podcast. You've added a ton of value. I know that many of our listeners and viewers will want to get your book. And thank you so much for being willing to share with us. You can find Sarah at sarahbowling.org. You can order her book at leadershipbooks.com. It's where you can find it, as well as Amazon. And thank you so much for joining us. And we wish you all the best in this coming season.
Thanks, Joseph.
Thank you for joining us for today's broadcast. I do hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And be sure to visit us online at leadershipbooks.store. There you'll find the works of some of the finest thought leaders today. And be sure to tune in here each week to gain even deeper insights from one of those leaders on the Compendium Podcast.